And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV, radio and podcast. Steve Deace here with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I want to show you guys something. I wore this shirt today on purpose. Okay. It's a parody shirt. All right. Buy a man, eat fish the day, teach man to a lifetime. Quote Joe Biden. Okay. Absolutely, this is not real. I think everybody recognizes this, but it could be. That's the point of parody, right? All right.
Close.
That it's not real, but it could be. That's the point of a satire. Okay. I got a notification over the last weekend that I had been guilty of posting false information on Facebook because I posted a picture of this T-shirt when my wife got it for me as a gag. That is the level of humorless scold that we are absolutely up against, okay? Because what the devil hates the most is to be what? Mocked. Which is why we need to mock away. We should be mocking Kamala, not taking her seriously as a candidate, taking her positions on the issues seriously, but not taking her as a political brand seriously. Mock. Because they'll tell you in the end, when you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelps is the one you hit. They'll tell you in the end. I mean, how many times have I posted things on Facebook that are logic, fact, data-based takedowns of Biden policies? Any of those ever get fact-checked? Not a one. What brought the fact-checkers out to me? This parody did. A picture of this T-shirt. That's right, they fact-checked a T-shirt. Okay? So your enemies will tell you what they can't handle. What their weak spots are. They'll reveal that to you in the way that they will react. Being mocked is just something they cannot sustain. They can't handle it. They were getting mocked. That's why Biden had to go. He was a picture of scorn and mockery. He was a Herbert Hoover, Jimmy Carter-esque figure overnight after that debate. That's why he had to go. And we ought to be doing that exact same branding to Kamala Harris right now. Because that's also something that most Americans actually already thought about her going into this. So you're giving them confirmation bias. It's also something that in a very short attention span society where people are going to start voting 48 days from today in maybe the most pivotal state in the union, it is also something that's easily absorbed for the low attention span society we have, as opposed to intricate data tables and facts and figures and visions and plans, right?
Yes.
So you can't always do that. You know, sometimes your opponents actually nominate serious people and you're going to have to take them seriously. But in this case, they did not. So we should not. Brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They have a flavor for every freedom-loving American. They have the same values as you. And it is shipped to you within days of being roasted, so you can ditch the grocery store coffee that could have been sitting on the shelves for up to 2 years anyway. All right, First Cup puts the roast on date on every bag. You want a discount, use my promo code DACE when you go to firstcup.com. Promo code DACE at firstcup.com, promo code DACE. All right, coming up on today's show, Pop Culture Tuesday. Has the MCU figured it out, or is this a desperate plea to resurrect itself? We'll get into that with Robert Downey Jr. returning as now the linchpin villain of the MCU. Next hour, Megan Basham, good friend of the show from the Daily Wire, is going to join us. She's got a new book out, and it's a bestseller, and it's chronicling in details, and she brought the receipts of how much of American evangelicalism, particularly its leadership, has completely and literally sold out to the spirit of the age. And again, they'll tell you what they can't stand. I mean, the amount of anguish that is coming this woman's way tells you she's over the target. So we're going to talk to Megan coming up a little bit later on. I want to make sure all of you are over the target. Listen, if we all have our generational things, we all have generational baggage and biases and nostalgias, you know, that no generation is immune to this, okay? And so we have the same thing on Gen X. We're way too passive as a generation. We were basically 30 at 17, okay? So we're kind of passive. We're kind of just letting the boomers stay there forever. And by the time it'll be our turn, the millennials will just bypass us. All right, that's kind of our generation's thing, passivity. But it was kind of cool to be passive. That's what kind of cool to, be searching for what to listen to YouTubes I still haven't found what I'm looking for. Not so cool to actually find it, right? It was cool to just sit there, with a Marlboro Red and a cup of coffee and a flannel shirt year round, and listening to Fell On Black Days, okay? But the
highest virtue is aloof.
Yes, correct. But it wasn't cool to actually, think to yourself, yeah, the world kind of is in this condition, so let's do something about it. That's our generation's thing, okay? And many of the passive men that we are trying to confront on this show daily are of which generation, Todd? Ours. Yeah. They're from our generation, okay? So that every generation comes with that, okay? So if you're of the boomer generation and you are just bound and emotionally determined to prove you've not been racist all these years, then I can't help that. Okay. And God bless you. I'm not sure how I'd react to being smeared like that with a scarlet letter for most of my adult life for nothing other than I really would just not like to see a third generation of complete and total dysfunction happen in America's urban areas. And for that, I'm the bad guy. I'd like to think I could rise above that. I'd like to think I'm that much of an iconoclastic contrarian, given the way that I grew up and the way that I'm wired, that it wouldn't cause me to succumb to this, determinative desire to prove that this is not true. But I don't know that, man. So if that's you, though, I can't do anything about that. But I do want you, here's what I can do something about. I'm going to blow your mind in the next segment of the show. And I'm going to show you data that demonstrates and proves there doesn't have to be actually any inroads made to any minority groups at all to win. It's just a complete and total scam. And that the way that you actually make inroads to minority groups is actually not even the way we're trying to do it, which is just, let's let more people out of prison than they do and attack Joe Biden from the left on crime bills. And no, that doesn't work. And that the reality is the GOP has a white voter problem. So just bookmark that. And I'm going to demonstrate this to you. I'm going to prove this to you at the bottom of this hour, that this entire fascination, near obsession to can we flip a point or two of 12% of the electorate is absolutely no path to electoral success whatsoever. And we'll get into that coming up at the bottom of the hour. All right. But before we do, let's begin as we always do with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by this.
I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you.
And it's gone.
The idea that men can gather to talk about how we feel. Interesting. Powerful concept.
That is actor Sean Astin on a Zoom meeting last night for a group called White Dudes for Harris. It was a star-studded lineup, including celebrities like Jeff Bridges and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Rear Admiral Pete Buttigieg also joined the call to talk about baby killing, because apparently it's okay for men to have an opinion about abortion now. He said the quiet part out loud.
I'm so glad she has made freedom the theme of her campaign, because I think in so many ways that's what's at stake. And yes, women's freedom is Exhibit A, after Donald Trump demolished the right to choose. But of course, men are also more free in a country where we have a president who stands up for things like access to abortion care. Men are more free.
I'm sorry, we got to do this. The left is still on J.D. Vance about his correct assessment regarding childless cat ladies running America. The memo went out, as this supercut from Grabian points out. Everybody is following their orders about the messaging on J.D. Vance, lock, stock, and barrel.
Some of what he and his running mate are saying, well, it's just plain weird.
These guys are just weird. That's where they are.
As weird and creepy as J.D. Vance.
Super weird idea from J.D. Vance.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's quite weird.
They're just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
Just plain weird.
That stuff is weird. They come across weird, and then they start being weird. Yeah, they're weird.
Being a really weird.
He's such a weirdo.
Donald Trump and his weirdo running mate, they're weird.
At a campaign event in Pennsylvania yesterday featuring Kamala and Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, Fox News met one of those cat ladies.
Yeah, what is your message to Vance?
You don't mess with childless cat ladies.
By the way, North Carolina Governor Roy Cooper has reportedly removed himself from contention for Kamala's VP spot, for what it's worth. Moving on, acting Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe testified in front of a Senate committee this morning and tried to answer questions about why his agency failed on July 13th to protect Donald Trump.
If I may, Senator, if I could point out something right now, if I may, and we will place this for the record, but this is the point of view. This is from the second floor of the AGR building. This point of view is the point of view where the counter sniper team locally was posted. The gold arrow indicates where the shooter fired from. Looking left. Why was the assailant not seen? When we were told that building was going to be covered, that there had been a face-to-face that afternoon, that our team leads met, this was the view. I could not, and I will not, and I cannot understand why there was not better coverage, or at least somebody looking at that roof line when that's where they were posted.
Laura Ingraham interviewed Donald Trump and asked him about the impact his attempted assassination had on his family.
What was Melania's reaction, if you don't mind my asking? I know this is very personal, when she learned about what happened on that field in Butler?
She was watching.
Oh, she was watching in real time?
She was watching live. It was all over the place. It was on television. It was on your network, but it was all over the place. And she was watching. I asked her that. I mean, I wasn't there. I was on the ground. And when the world started to, like, you could talk to people, I said, so what was your feeling? And she can't really even talk about it.
Traumatized.
Which is okay, because that means she likes me.
Trump campaign made its first major TV ad buy in all the crucial battleground states. It's about a $12 million ad buy. Here is that ad.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I approve this message.
This is America's border czar, and she's failed us. Under Harris, over 10 million illegally here. 250,000 Americans dead from fentanyl. Brutal migrant crimes. And ISIS now here.
Do you have any plans to visit the border? You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. I mean, I don't understand the point that you're making.
Kamala Harris failed, weak, dangerously liberal.
Checking in on the Olympics, two dudes who had previously been banned from competing in women's boxing events during world championships have been cleared to compete at the Olympics in the women's category. Imain Khalif of Algeria and Lin Yu-ting of Taiwan were thrown out of the world championship tournament last year amid questions over their biological sex, but the International Olympic Committee bosses said both meet eligibility criteria and will box in the coming days against women. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by Relief Factor. If you want to get back to when you could live a more active lifestyle, but you're thinking that's just not in the cards, the chronic pain will never go away, you might be right. I mean, we do get older. You know, these bodies in a physical form in a fallen world aren't meant to live forever. But it might not be the case either. In fact, over the years, over 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start from Relief Factor. And at least 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less that they've stuck around with the product long term. So why don't you see, if you don't see a difference in 3 weeks or less with this drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, but this is meant to go right after the inflammation that is the likely cause of your chronic pain. And if you want to see if you're their next success story, it's just $20 to find out. When you go to relieffactor.com, again, head over to relieffactor.com. All right, three things that I want to highlight in Aaron's montage. Number one, note to self, ever produce a movie anymore, do not cast Sean Astin. Not going to pay somebody to be that absolutely mind-numbingly stupid. Okay. Because he does get cast in a lot of faith-based films these days. Note to self, he's off the list. All right. I mean, I can't have that kind of stupid on as a producer on my set. Never happening. Right? Well, that level of dumb just will not be permitted on any set that I am producing and or responsible for fundraising for and therefore paying for. That will not happen. So note to self.
I hope you're open to like Aaron and I starring in your next movie.
And you know I'm that damn stubborn that I am, as a matter of fact. Yeah, I am.
Because that was, after that, he mentioned Jeff Bridges, arguably man's man of Hollywood, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, both superhero movie. I mean, the list of allies goes thin.
Well, it was already thin going in. Yeah. But those guys aren't doing our movies. You know what I'm saying? Aston has done a ton of faith-based films in the last decade plus. So he's clearly not unfamiliar with who we are as a people. And we've paid him a good deal of money. And he's done some very good roles and made some very good faith-based films. They just won't be any, if I'm fortunate enough to do any more, they won't be any produced by me. So scratch him off the list. I think that, you know what, I want to do this next. The Trump ad buy. That is a phenomenal ad. And to me, I hope it's a Rosetta Stone for what the message should be for the rest of this race now. You can have variations on the theme, right? We can have her acting ridiculous and saying ridiculous things about virtually any issue people care about, right? Okay. But what I love about that ad, one of the best ads, you know, in 1988, everybody remembers the Willie Horton ad. And that was an ad that was produced by Lee Atwater, one of the late, great, few brilliant consultants the Republican Party's ever had. And it was about the furlough program that Michael Dukakis had as governor of Massachusetts back in the day, where they were giving violent offenders weekend furloughs. They could get out of prison for a week with good behavior or a weekend with good behavior. And, you know, essentially, as long as they reported back, they were given some form of freedom on good behavior. Because we're going to rehabilitate murderers and rapists, of course. And, you know, you would think it's funny, when God created a nation called Israel, how many prisons did they build? Do you guys ever, if those of you that have visited the Holy Land, you ever visited the Nazareth Penitentiary? Well, here at this landmark, this was the Bethsaida prison. You ever visited that? No? Yeah. So when God created a nation called Israel, how many prisons did he build, guys? Do you know what the number was? What do you think it was?
0?
It was 0, guys. It was 0. Yeah, they didn't have any prisons.
He did.
In God's country.
He did create millstones.
Yeah, that's why they didn't have prisons. Okay. Anyway, moving on. But everybody remembers the Willie Horton ad, and it was this revolving door, and the Dems, of course, wanted to say it was racist because Willie Horton was this murderer who Dukakis had let out of prison, and then he murdered some white people while he was out on furlough. And the H.W. Bush campaign in 1988, I know you get Aaron's looking at me like, what is this? This happened? Like this is, and the Bushes ran this ad? What timeline was this? This was a time from before you were born, my friend, where things actually were discussed like this. Okay, and Republicans didn't run ads saying, no, we even let more people out of prison than they did. There was this time. It was saner. It was a simpler time. It was a better time. Okay, before auto-tune. Anyway, and that really and it led to a devastating moment. It wasn't that ad was devastating. It just led to the clinching moment of that election. And it was when George Shaw, who was the longtime black lead anchor for CNN? Or Bernard Shaw. Shaw, yeah, okay. And Bernie Shaw asked Michael Dukakis, hey, if your wife Kitty was raped and murdered, would you want the death penalty for her assailant? And he said no. And the election was over that day. It was just over that very day. It was just a matter of counting votes. But I would actually argue that the more effective ad, the Willie Horton ad did produce that viral at the time moment that was decisive in the election. But in terms of ad, the most effective ad that the Bush campaign ran that year was an ad of Michael Dukakis looking absolutely ridiculous in a tank. Do you remember this?
Yes.
Trying to demonstrate that he was not some Northeastern lib, okay? He wasn't another Carter or Mondale, that he was a badass, and he's just this little Northeastern lib is riding around in this tank, and it's way too big for him. He looked utterly ridiculous, and if you watch the ad, there's the visual is of Dukakis in this tank while they're talking about how left-wing this guy is, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. Does that ad that Trump just rolled out this morning not look almost exactly like that? And I love it. Because what it does is it attacks Kamala where to the attention span of modern Americans today, the weakest. She's a ridiculous figure. She's just not a serious figure, not a serious person, and no one was taking her seriously. And there's a reason why Barack Obama didn't want to endorse her right away when everybody else was, because he is a serious person, and he recognizes that Kamala Harris is not. All right? But what I love also is that the ad then links her record with her persona together. And if I'm a Republican running for Congress or Senate, and I'm probably running behind Donald Trump in a lot of these races right now, I need the Trump campaign to do that for me on my behalf. Because I need some coattails right now. Because virtually every Republican Senate candidate in a battleground race is running behind Donald Trump in their own state right now. So I need his coattails, and I need a message that doesn't just indicate that Kamala in and of herself is a ridiculous figure, but her where she is on the issues are also utterly ridiculous, and they go together as cringy. And that ad is phenomenal. It does both of those things, Aaron.
Yes, that last part I think is really important. This was in the vein of that Dave McCormick, Pennsylvania Republican Senate candidate ad in that we featured last week in one of the montages. Here's what it does. It still talks about the issues. And when you hear her positions, her records on the issues, it is impossible even for a normie who hopefully that message penetrates down to the normies. It is impossible for them to not come away with if they're being honest, it's impossible for them not to come away with the message, I'm in danger. The weirdness of the cackling that you have, both in the Dave McCormick ad and interspersed throughout that ad that you just heard there, that takes it to a different level. That's the frosting on the cake. To put it this way, in Breaking Bad terms, Mike Ehrmantraut has got the order from Gus Fring, that dude's got to go. And so he tracks you down, and he's got a gun pointed at your head. I'm in danger. Okay? That's what the record says. I'm in danger. However, that's a different story. Tuco Salamanca, you got on his wrong side. He just snorted some of the blue stuff. He's also danger to you, and he's crazy. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different level. That's a whole different visceral reaction. And I think that's what this does. It focuses on the issues. She is a danger to your well-being. She is a danger to your way of life. You add in the cackling, she's a crazy danger to she's insane. I think that's what this accomplishes. And I think that needs to be, like you said, the Rosetta Stone going forward of messaging, at least in the air war.
Correct. Which brings me to the final thing I want to discuss. And that is the testimony this morning from the acting Secret Service director, who got up there, used in the visual that Aaron demonstrated, debunked the whole sloped roof mythology, okay, that trained law enforcement, the roof was too sloped, they could not have gotten onto that surface in order to restrain or detain in advance the shooter. That's not true. Demonstrated the clear line of sight that they had to take that shooter out. Okay, and is offering up that he has no explanation. Now, this is in the Senate. The Democrats are in control of the Senate. Gary Peters is a Democratic senator from Michigan. He is their chairman of this committee. He is being talked about right now as a dark horse Veep candidate for Kamala Harris. Okay? So I think we have to spend a minute or two here asking ourselves, why are they willingly volunteering this information? Now, this is a show that believes that whose prime directive is a biblical worldview. And God is sovereign, correct?
Yes.
And he makes the rain fall on the just and the unjust alike, correct?
Yes.
Nothing is outside of his purview, correct?
Right.
So we leave open the possibility here, and in fact, this would be our preferred option. So we leave open the possibility that even the spirit of the age is under the sovereignty of God, and when he chooses to put his thumb on the scale and move the pieces on the board, like Luther once said, he could speak out of the back ass of Balaam's donkey. He can speak out of somebody like me, right? Okay, so he can utilize even the spirit of the age's own acolytes and political officials to get his message out if he wants, because that's what you get to do when you're the only one true living God, right?
Yep.
So let's leave open that possibility that this is just an exercise of God's sovereignty, that the heavens declare his glory. The truth will eventually emerge. It's his universe. It's an iron law of his universe that it bends to truth eventually, and that not even the spirit of the age's own forces can hold the truth back. That's possible here. Okay, so with that stipulated as a possibility, let's look at the other option, and let's say that this is the play of the enemy. To what end? Why are we volunteering this information? What would be the reason for it, do you think?
Well,
because it's pretty damning information, guys.
Yeah, one reason they do this is because it's just there's a long way to go from testimony such as this. They're always measuring how much we're paying attention, which is the first thing I think of when Aaron puts that video in the montage and we analyze it. I agree with every bit of your analysis. But then, Aaron starts talking about the normies and if they have a shred of honesty. Well, do they? That's the thing. I think we're always being probed for, are we going to accept the next COVID or not? So I think we're getting a taste. And I think it's at the very least a value bet that we got other stuff to do than pay attention to this. So that's my first thought.
Yeah, I was, when I was telling you asked any breaking news, and I was telling you the acting Secret Service director was testifying in front of Congress. I said he sounded very upset. I wasn't sure if that was an act. Now, it is, to me, just an act. As we're talking here, more clips are coming in from this testimony in front of that Senate committee. And he's talking about some social media account that they found from allegedly from Thomas Matthew Crooks. He had anti-Semitic, anti-immigration views. Oh, come on. What? They're not detailing. Maybe that's true. Maybe. Who knows? But they're not going into specifics about that. Having watched that video over again and seeing again some of the clips that are coming in, this is just to cover your butt. This is just to cover your butt testimony, from what I can see. He's now blaming the local. That's what he was doing in that clip. Now that I watch it over again, he's blaming the local law enforcement. He said they did have a face-to-face meeting, which flies in the face of the clip that we heard from the local SWAT team yesterday, saying that they didn't have a local. So this is just, we're back into the realm of chaos here, which is what is the fluent language of hell? It is chaos. So,
see, remember after Trump won, and Nick Kristof said, we need to hit the pause button and
NPR invited me on for self-reflection. Yeah.
That lasted longer than the de-escalation.
Or PBS, I'm sorry.
Yeah, that moment lasted longer than the de-escalation. Maybe we should tone down the rhetoric in this case. We're just back to bleeps and giggles now. It's the circus.
He was slurring the whole way through, so most people probably couldn't understand it. But basically, Biden went right back to his danger to democracy riff yesterday, almost as if to say, hey, guys, last time we did this, you missed. Don't miss this time, basically, is what he was doing. Yeah. So let's reset this thing, and this time don't miss, right? Right. So, but I need some time to consider what would be the reasons. If this isn't just the providence of God, just even using the forces of darkness to get the truth out one way or the other, then what would be the reasons that they would allow their acolytes to come forward with this information? Is it that the real truth of what happened is so bad that they need to counter a believable counter truth right now?
Well, I was just thinking we and I think maybe even you have already pointed out, don't hold your breath on the whole Mike Johnson, we're going to investigate this kind of thing. But, let's say there's somebody who plans on being serious about that, and the Democrats aren't quite sure what they know or what they have. To your point here, I think you're exactly right. You get out fronted on the left, you kind of somehow, you make this old news, even though that should be impossible until you get to the bottom of all this. But yeah, you already didn't we already talk about this? Because listen, Americans aren't citizens. They're going to get bored. They want to move on from everything bad and get comfortable again.
Okay. Something I think we need to keep an eye on, because that is a very damning revelation in my view. And so to what end? When we come back, much of the election narrative you've been sold is simply mythology and not true, and I'll prove it to you next. right, back here on the Steve Deace Show. If you are really much braver than I am and daring to get involved in the Let's Go Brandon real estate market during these unprecedented times.
Bing, 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 bing.
Yes. Man, I mean, you need, first of all, get some Kevlar. Number two, make sure you get a real estate agent that you can trust. Where would you find them? The name kind of says it all. Head over to realestateagentsitrust.com. That's realestateagentsitrust.com. And there we can connect you with a real estate agent whose track record of success has been completely vetted. Otherwise, we wouldn't put them there in the database and recommend them to you. And a lot of times they come from right here in our audience as well, so that you guys also have a common value system too that you can rely upon. All right, so realestateagentsitrust.com, whether there's somewhere you want to go across town or you need to move across the country, they can help you get the final result, the finished result, the W you're looking for in a market that is beyond uncertain. Realestateagentsitrust.com. Again, realestateagentsitrust.com. All right, for the second week in a row, I'm resurrecting fake news or not, and we're giving idolatry or not the week off. Because much of what you are being told about elections is just simply not true. And a lot of times, frankly, you can't trust the Fox News narrative for different reasons any more than you can trust the corporate media narrative, because both of them are trying to control you, frankly, albeit for different reasons. Okay, I mean, the corporate media is trying to end you, and Fox is trying to fit you into to their bulwark with their metric, their paradigm, their talking points. They view themselves as the gatekeeper of, you can't be any further right than Fox. You can't have any talking points that go against Fox. And a lot of people, frankly, won't challenge this because the ultimate goal is to get on said Fox for a lot of people. But with Tucker gone, my odds of getting on Fox are very low. Because other than Tucker inviting me, how often did I get on Fox, guys? Not that often, okay? So, I've got nothing to worry about. I don't have to worry about running afoul of a potential future Fox News gig. One is not forthcoming. So I'm going to tell you the truth. Much of what you're being told about elections and racial demographics, and let me say this, I hate all this stuff. I can't stand it. The first political activism I ever did with my show was to get the first black American on the Des Moines School Board ever. In the nascent, I literally had a show for like a few hours, and that was the first thing I tried to do. I worked very hard in my own community to help forge relationships with so-called black and white churches here. And out of that, relationships developed that we founded the very first urban Christian school in this history of Des Moines, Joshua Academy. I can't stand this stuff. You guys know I don't like talking about racial stuff, dynamics. I have no I grew up with a racist in my home, honestly. It's one of the reasons I got so much into basketball. He viewed that as the N-bomb sport. My Democrat union steward stepdad just would drop racial blasts all the time. I detested it, put my teeth on edge. So I kind of got into basketball originally just to rebel against him, and then I ended up loving it. On the other hand, I have no white guilt whatsoever. I've been on food stamps, ADC, government cheese, born out of wedlock. Pretty common story, frankly, of much of urban America. I lived it myself. It was just called a white trash neighborhood where I came from. So my ancestors came over here from Sicily and Italy. They were the Dagos, Wops, and garlic eaters that lived in the ghettos first. I don't have any guilt either. I don't owe you a damn thing. No one gave me anything. All I got was a biological that didn't bother, and a stepdad who thought the great Santini was a model for fatherhood, whose mantra was the beatings will continue until morale improves. No, I went to 11 different schools. I got nothing. Had to earn everything I got growing up. So I don't owe you a damn thing. Nothing. So I both hate racial idolatry on one end, and I can't stand racial pandering on the other. Which means on this topic, I'm a unicorn. I have zero tolerance for racism and absolutely no sympathy for white liberal guilt, nor am I infested with it on any level at all. I don't care. But if we're going to define these things this way, then we ought to be able to look at these narratives and find out if they're telling us the truth, right? Just like we said about polls yesterday, right? Well, what I'm about to tell you is going to debunk virtually everything you've been told, including from much of your own media, about how elections work and how we need to win. Let's start here. And I'm going to go back 40 years of data here. This is Republicans in the black vote in the last 40 years. This is the percentage of the overall electorate that the black vote was, and the percent that voted Republican. 1984, it was 10% of the electorate. Republicans got 9%. 1988, it was 10% of the electorate. Republicans got 11%. 1992, it was 8% of the electorate. Republicans got 10%. 1996, it was 10% of the electorate. Bob Dole got 12%. In 2000, it was 10% of the electorate. George W. Bush got 9%, that compassionate conservative message. In 2004, it was 11% of the electorate. Republicans got 11%. These numbers all look very similar.
Yes.
Regardless of what style of Republican. Are you following this trend line here? Okay. John McCain, it was 13%. Now that's Obama had historic black turnout. It was 13% of the electorate. 13. If you watch Fox News, they're going to make it seem like there's as many blacks that vote as Gen Z calling themselves LGBTQFU right now. They're like 40% of the vote. We had the highest turnout in American history of the black vote in 2008 with Obama. It was 13%. Republicans got 4%. In 2012 with Obama again, 13%. Republicans got 6%. In Trump 2016, it was 12%. Trump got 8%. And then let's empty the prisons. This was the Jared Kushner thing. We're going to empty the prisons. We're going to do all this. Okay. It was 13% of the electorate again in 2020. And for that, Donald Trump, for all the pandering that he was told to do and went along with, he got the same percentage of the black vote Bob Dole got in 1996. That's what he got. And its all-time record turnout is 13. And yet, now ask yourself if the level of obsession with this sector of the vote lines up with the all-time record is 13% of the electorate. If you looked at the balance, the content to turnout ratio that we produce, obsessing about this, do these numbers add up?
No.
No, not at all. But they're the truth. Republicans do have a problem. But you're going to see it's actually white voters is their problem. Now, this is white women, the white women vote over the last 20 years. I could not get reliable exit polling data that I would trust to put my name on earlier than 2000. So that's why we're only going back this far for this. Same thing, percentage of the electorate that they were, and then the percent that voted Republican. All right? They were 38% of the electorate in 2000. That would be 3 times more than the black vote. Republicans got 49%. They were 41% of the electorate in 2004. George W. Bush got 55%, kind of the security moms of that election cycle post 9/11. All right, and by the way, that was the last time that a Republican won the popular vote. McCain 08, they were 39% of the election. He actually won white women over Barack Obama by 6 points. Romney 2012, that dipped to 36%. There were at least 4 million white voters that didn't vote in 2012 that voted for McCain in 2008. Many of them actually white women. 36% turnout of white women in the 2012 election. Romney got 57%. If he had gotten McCain, what does that mean? Let me tell you what that means. If he gets that same percentage but the same turnout that McCain gets, Mitt Romney wins that election. That's what it means. Even with Barack Obama, again, getting record black vote. That's what it means. He just had to perform as well as John McCain did in turning out white women. He would have won. Trump 2016, it only goes up to 37%. And even against a white woman president, he still won white women 52-48. Trump 2020, 32% of the electorate, white women. And I know there's the whole Karen thing and everything else. And we were all ruled by cat lady Karens during COVID, right? They were only 32% of the electorate and he got 55%. If Donald Trump had turned out white women at the rate John McCain did, he'd have won the election and probably the popular vote. By the way, which of those years did Democrats win white women? None. None of those years, actually. How about the married vote? Now, it's hard to come up with reliable exit polling data on white married women pre-2008, okay? So you see what I did? You can kind of deductively guess what the numbers are based on what white women are saying and then the married vote. okay, because white women would be the female demographic that's the most married, okay? So here's our Republicans in the married vote this century. Again, percentage of electorate, percentage that voted Republican. 60% of the electorate in 2000, George W. Bush got 53%. In 2004, when moral values were the number 2 issue in the exit polls, they were 63% of the electorate, an all-time high. George W. Bush got 57% of that vote. McCain, they were 60% of the electorate. He got rolled. He still beat Barack Obama with married people, and by 6 points. Romney, 2012, 59% of the electorate married. Romney got 56%. Trump, 2016, 59% of the electorate, and he only got 52%. If he had performed as well as Mitt Romney did with married people, Trump would have won the popular vote, and convincingly. Trump 2020, they were only 56% of the electorate. He only got 53%. If Trump performed with married people at a Mitt Romney Bush level, he'd be president right now. Let's continue on. Let's look at this. States ranked by black population. Percentage of their population is black as of January of this year. All right. Mississippi's number 1, 39%. Number 2, Louisiana, 34%. Georgia is number 3, your first battleground state at 31 and change. Maryland, Alabama, South Carolina, Delaware. These are all states that are not contestable in the Electoral College. North Carolina's next, 21.8%. Virginia next, 20.57%. What's a battleground state? A state both sides have won so far this century. That's what. So Minnesota, not a battleground state until proven otherwise. Republicans haven't won it since 1972. I wasn't alive. And then New York is next at 17.44%. What do you see there? What you see there are most of the states that have the highest black population. It's located in places that just aren't contested in the election. Only 3 out of 10 of those states would be considered battleground states. What about the other traditional battleground states? Well, here they are. Florida is 12th, Michigan 15th, Ohio 17th, Pennsylvania 19th, Nevada 23rd, Wisconsin 30th, Arizona 33rd, Colorado 35th. Again, do these numbers, what you're seeing demographically, line up with the level of obsessive coverage that occurs in conservative media, that this is how we're going to win these states? Do those demographic numbers line up with that coverage?
They do not.
They do not. So here are some conclusions. 6 of the top 13 states with the highest percentage of black voters are reliably red states Republicans haven't lost since before 1980. Guys, next, only 7.22% of California is black. There is a higher percentage of blacks in Kansas in terms of the total population than there are in California. And yet this is considered the strongest Democratic state in the union. Does that line up with would that line up with your preconceived notion again of the level of obsession we have over this? Constantly defending ourselves, we're not racists. All the time, to the point that we have to get off message, hey, you nearly killed our candidate, so we can respond to J.D. Vance's weird. No, it doesn't. Next. No, well, Steve, maybe we need to pander to the Hispanics instead. Well, only 12 states in the entire union have Hispanic populations above 15%. 12 in the whole country. Among those, only 4, Arizona, Nevada, Florida, and Colorado, would be considered battleground states. The other 11 are states that have not changed parties in a presidential election so far this century. No Rust Belt state has a Hispanic population higher than 7.6%, and that's Pennsylvania. We have to have open borders. We got to amnesty everybody to win. Did that narrative line up with those demographics either?
No.
It does not. You're being left with some conclusions here that either people are really bad at this, or a lot of people wearing our uniform are lying their asses off. Conclusion from all these numbers. The GOP actually has a white voter problem, which is contrary to the entire narrative being fed to you by all the left media and much of the right media now as well. That doesn't mean we shouldn't go after minority voters, because we should, especially since they are sadly in the communities most negatively impacted by Democrat destructive policies. And we are commanded to love our neighbor as we love ourselves after all. However, doing so via pandering, such as jailbreak, such as let's give up on the culture war and have a black, lesbian, bisexual porn star speak at the convention instead. That's not how this works. And you need serious issue contrasts. That does nothing but barely put a dent in the Democrats' minority vote stranglehold, barely a dent in it. While also losing you white voters you should otherwise be getting. Who are like, I moved out to the suburbs to not have my kids raped by illegal aliens. I moved out of the suburbs to get away from the school boards that want to teach them that they can switch their gender with the same drugs we give to pedophiles in prison to castrate them or not. Now, if I had to guess, many people in this industry don't know this data. And are probably just going with the narrative fed to them, assuming Fox News and everybody else is telling them the truth. But the narrative is wrong and explains a lot of how we lose, actually. The Democrats don't spend so much time stigmatizing white voters because they don't matter. But because they do, actually. And they actually matter most if we're just doing simple math in terms of demographic turnout. All kinds of states have barely any Hispanic and black voters. Every single one of them has white women and married people. And you're also being told that, white women are gone. So we got to replace, they're all Karens. Which of these years did Democrats win white women voters that I just showed you? Which of the years?
No.
I mean, if Donald Trump can't lose white women voters, then we're probably pretty far away from losing white women voters. Fair? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah, probably pretty far off. Now, do we have a serious Karen infestation in the suburbs where all three of us live?
Yes.
Yes, but the idea that they're every one of our neighbors is simply not true. They're the annoying chick in the cul-de-sac with the Subaru and the coexist bumper sticker. I want to win. Not get booked to do Brothers Be Flippin' garbage on Fox News. I'm in this because I don't want our kids and your kids castrated at school next week. Not so I can finally prove to you all these years I've not been a racist. I don't give a crap about any of that. But this obsession with these minority demographics have led us to some incredibly destructive policies like amnesties and jailbreaks and garnered nothing in return electorally. Why? Because they're in defiance of the actual math, as I just proved to you. More in a moment. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast with Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. And Aaron, can you do me a favor now that I'm thinking about it? Sure. Can you take that last clip and let's put that out as a standalone so that can be shared by as many people as possible? We just debunked about 25 years worth of complete and total BS on elections and demographics from the entirety of corporate media and too much, frankly, of so-called conservative media. And as many of our people as possible need to see this so they just don't keep making the same dumb mistakes we have of the last few cycles. Can we do that?
I adore your optimism.
Well, I'm going to try, or I'm going to die trying. One of the two. All right. Let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter or X, Getter, Instagram, and TikTok. And then if you listen to the podcast version of the show, if you would not mind, only if you like us, of course. I mean, if you don't like us, we would never ask you to lie. If you kind of like us, we are certainly shameless enough to ask you to exaggerate. No commandment against exaggeration, right? Exaggeration, I think, is okay. So if you're like, this show's okay, you should absolutely just give it 5 stars. Just go right to 5. When I look on there, I only want to see 1 and 5 star reviews. That's what we're going for. But there's no point. If we get a 2 or 3 star review, we have failed. All right. Every review should be 1 or 5 stars.
You're there or you're out.
That's right. All right. And so if you want to leave us one of those, thank you to all of you who have. If you want to subscribe as well or follow, that's what iTunes does these days. That way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your feed every single time. And we thank all of you that have done that for us as well. I know a lot of us are concerned right now when it seems like our God-given freedoms are up for taking more than ever before. But you know what they can't take away? Self-reliance and the peace of mind that comes with that. And that's where our friends at My Patriot Supply come in. They have served millions of American families. They're the most trusted name, and that could never happen here, just in case it happens here again. All right. And for good reasons, too. Right now, you can save $200 on their best-selling 3-month emergency food kits. That's breakfast, lunch, dinner, even drinks and snacks. And there's well over a dozen varieties of food. So while everyone else is starving, you're actually going to be able to mix and match sides and proteins. You can't beat that, folks. It lasts for up to 25 years as well. And it's and that's because it's sealed in really unpierceable packaging. So if you want to have that peace of mind to know I'm ready just in case, that could never happen here. Happens here again, as it's been happening here a lot the last few years. Go to preparewithdace.com, save $200 off of each kit. And yes, free shipping is included as well. Preparewithdace.com is where you want to go. The name of the book, Shepherds for Sale. How evangelical leaders traded the truth for a leftist agenda. I was proud to endorse this book. And the woman who wrote it, Megan Basham from the Daily Wire, is here with us. It's good to see you again, Megan. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. It's good to be here. It's always great to be here, though. I almost don't recognize the guy in your chair.
Really? What happened? Did I get younger? That didn't happen. There's way more salt in my hair. What's that?
I was saying, you look like you got younger, thinner, fitter. You're just like in fighting shape.
Well, I already endorsed the book. You don't have to schmooze me now. I already gave you the endorsement, but thank you. I have lost a considerable amount of weight, which I don't know if it's making me look younger. I mean, there's a lot of salt in the hair at this particular moment, but I do appreciate that. Thank you. First of all, I want to begin by doing this. I have seen the amount of blowback you are getting to this book. And before we get into why and the fact that it's well-deserved, given what you have done here, I just want to say this, and I said this to you privately, but I want to say it to you publicly. Well done, good and faithful servant. Okay, this is what it looks like when you are not firing a spit wad at hell. This is what happens. When you throw a rock into a pack of dogs, the one that yelped is the one you hit. Okay. And so the potency, the best endorsements, I saw you laying out this morning, some of us who endorsed this book. I even saw you had John MacArthur saying this might be the most important book on modern evangelicalism he's ever read. Okay. That's high praise. But the best endorsements, sister, the best ones, okay, are from all of the people who are saying, it's me. I'm the one. I'm who she's talking about. I'm the one. I'm the false shepherd she's warning you about. I'm the one who got bought off. I'm the wolf in sheep's clothing. Okay, it's me. In case you were wondering, it's me. It's me. Those are the best endorsements you could have asked for.
Well, thank you. And if I'm not tearing up now to hear you say that, it's because I had already told you I teared up when you sent that to me privately. So, yeah, I have taken a lot of hits over it, and receiving your note was extremely encouraging in a moment that needed encouragement. So I appreciated it very much. And I'm not really particularly surprised at a lot of the blowback that's coming, or about the fact that a lot of it seems to be very coordinated. So all you can do is say, I expected this, and plow through and, keep walking ahead and going, I know that you've got me here, Lord. You brought me through a lot of toils and snares to get this book to the finish line. Went through a lot of legal hassles, received a lot of cease and desist letters, a lot of back channel notes to my publisher, and yet still we are here at this day. So I'm incredibly grateful to you and to everyone who spent your social capital on me to help me get to this day.
Well, you can see it's being rewarded, and this is why they're threatened. You're in the top 50 overall right now, I just saw on Amazon, and that's incredible. But just to put a finer point on it, for people that don't know how the publishing business works, folks, less than 3% of books published in any given year will sell more than 2,000 copies. Less than 3%. All right. And it's not really an endeavor for a middle class standard of living. I mean, it's kind of either a hobby or a vanity project, something you want to do, or you're like uber successful. It's really hard to live a middle-class lifestyle as an author, because less than 3% of books in a given year will sell 2,000 copies. Last I checked, 35 million books are on Amazon. So to get into their top 50 overall on Amazon is incredibly elite company. And that's a testimony to the fact that this is a message that the Lord knows that his people need to hear and need to be made aware of. And I have a hypothesis. If you don't mind, I want to ask you a personal question to start.
Okay.
What is your background? How did you come to faith and end up writing a book like this?
So I was raised in a Christian home, but I don't believe I was a Christian until my early 20s. And, like a lot of people, I couldn't tell you exactly, here was the moment that I became a Christian. But I know that despite being raised going to church and being in youth groups, I did not have an interest in spiritual things. And then I got to college, and my college years were what can only be called a wastrel's life. I was an extreme version of the prodigal story. And I struggled with drug abuse and alcohol abuse. And I have joked that you might colloquially call it party girl. But I was miserable. And by the time I found Jesus, I was as desperate and miserable as a human being could be. And it's a long story about how that happened, but it was thanks to, surprisingly, reading The Quest for the Holy Grail was actually what brought me to the Lord. Essentially, there's a much older version than Thomas Mallory's that includes a lot of hermits confronting Lancelot about his lust and his wastrel living. And as an English major, was reading that, it just convicted me that here I am, hundreds and hundreds of years later, living the same lifestyle. That convicted me. And then in my sanctification process, I found John MacArthur's work. And, for a brief period there, while I was trying to sort of come out of the sinful lifestyle that I was in, I encountered Christian therapy speak that was encouraging me to focus on my traumas and the wrongs that had been done to me in my past. And of course, there's some truth to that. Like you, I was born to an unwed teenage mother, and that can come with its own difficulties that you have to face. But it was this Christian therapeutics that were teaching me to focus on wrongs that had been done to me instead of focusing on what I had been forgiven, and teaching me to focus on grievance instead of gratitude. So when I found John MacArthur's work, man, that was just like a light switch. It just told me, fix your eyes on Jesus right now. Forget about what has gone behind. Look ahead to the prize that the Lord has for you. And that just bred within me such a love for the church and its transforming work and the sanctification process that should go on there. And so all I can say is that all of this is born out of a deep, deep love for the church and the work that Christ has done in my life to truly make me a new creation who is so grateful to even be alive right now.
I'm not surprised to hear that. One of your members of your family who listens to our show faithfully kind of tipped me off to some of this, but my experience has been that, I look at two of my favorite theologians, Augustine, who was in a literal sex cult, who once prayed, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Okay. Josh McDowell, who was an atheist and just started off investigating Christianity because he thought one of the girls at an evangelism group on campus was cute. And she made a bet with him that he couldn't disprove Christianity. And he was confident after growing up with an alcoholic, abusive father that he could. That and then I've mentioned my audience knows my background very well, and now they know yours. I think those of us who uniquely have come from the darkness in and of itself, that it's not something theoretical to us, that we have lived the mistakes and the tragedies that come with buying into what the spirit of the age and any age is selling in contrast to the gospel. I think those of us who come to that, or come through that, I just think inherently come with maybe a fervor, for lack of a better term, for orthodoxy and narrow roads, that those who maybe had much better upbringings and than I did and didn't have the period of the 20s that you did, maybe they just don't quite understand. They know, but they've not lived truly what the human toll of abandoning that narrow road truly is. And I think it does give those of us who do know that maybe more of an edge in that regard.
Yeah, I think it does breed a certain discernment because you know counterfeits when you see them. You know the truth that saved you. And when someone's peddling something that is not that truth, that is peddling social programs instead and trying to convince us that we can perfect men down here, we know how very, very in error they are. So I would say that that's absolutely what gave me the passion for this topic. And it gives me, I'll use the word zeal. Let's say the word it gives me the zeal to root out false teaching and to root out all of the worldly philosophies that are being married to the gospel, because pure gospel is the only thing that saves.
Amen. Which brings us to your book now. First of all, how did you even get on this topic? How did this even begin?
Well, it wasn't like I had a plan that I was going to write a book about this. Like so many people, I think starting back in 2019, I started to just have disquiet about some of the things I saw that were going on in the church. It seemed like the discussions about racial reconciliation started to take on a new and dark edge. You saw pastors like Matt Chandler, who is a megachurch pastor and head of the Acts 29 church planting network, talking about white privilege and how we would never get rid of our white privilege that gives us this bag of assets we have that other people don't have if they're minorities. You saw the provost at, I think at that time, the largest seminary in the U.S., Southern Seminary in Kentucky, saying that he would always be a racist and would never be able to escape the sin of racism because he's white. And so many things like that. This very divisive CRT curriculum being peddled in churches that demanded that white people not speak for this first 6 months that they were part of these Bible study groups. So all of that was concerning. And then you go into 2020, and that is the year where those, little quiet alarm bells became just, clanging symbols of alarm, where you went, we have a massive problem here. When you looked at how the church handled COVID, and not to say all churches, but a lot of really large ministries and well-known leaders, how they handled COVID. And you look at how they handled so many of the false narratives that were peddled during the George Floyd riots. And all of that told you we had a massive problem. And at that point, I started writing stories about what was going on. People like you gave them a boost because you recognized the issue as well. And from there, it just kind of snowballed because I was just flooded with calls, with messages, with texts from people saying, hey, this is what's going on in our church. This is what's going on in our ministry. And suddenly you saw it everywhere. And as I started investigating, I found that, yes, some of it was organic, just being influenced to compromise and capitulate because of a desire to be seen as acceptable in the world's eyes. But then some of it was also being very deliberately orchestrated by left-wing billionaires, some of whose names like George Soros and other guys like Pierre Omidyar of eBay. And that was when I realized, okay, there is really a lot more here than one article, and frankly, than even one book can cover.
How did they get their clutches into the church? How would they even know where to go, whom to call, or were these people planted, for example? Like Ed Stetzer, let me just use him as an example, because both you and I have singled him out in recent times, and I think very deservedly so. Was Ed Stetzer always like this? It was 2004. Like, a buddy of mine's going through a very tough time in his marriage right now. And he told me he went and got a book from Tim Keller to read. And I went, oh no. He goes, don't worry. He wrote it before 2006. And I said, okay, then you're fine. Okay. I mean, if you go look at a lot of early 21st century Tim Keller work, it doesn't look anything at all like the stuff he was doing towards the end of his life. So was Ed Stetzer always like this? Always just a guy who was just always kind of a simp for the spirit of the age and had a great desire to be not one of those Christians? Or were people like him planted? Did you find that out in your book, how they got in?
I think there's a little bit of both. I would say that Ed Stetzer at one time seemed solid to me as well. Or if you look at someone like Russell Moore, at Christianity Today. I can tell you that I go back and I read some of his older work, and it is like it is a different person. I don't recognize the person who is writing about the importance of male headship. And in fact, even going so far as to endorse the idea of patriarchy. Like you think of today's Russell Moore doing that, and that's just an astonishing thing to read now. So you can see a very clear shift in his doctrine. And I would say the same thing with Ed Stetzer. If you go back and read old things, it doesn't seem concerning. And probably maybe around that same period that you just pinpointed, around 2004. But I also think there are people who do
David French in the late 90s, early 2000s was the culture warrior at National Review, for example. Yes.
I mean, and that is bizarre, right? To go, and you don't even have to go that far back with David French. You just go back to 2015 and read David French, and it is literally like you're reading something from a different human being. It's a little hard to wrap your mind around. But I do also think that some of these ministry leaders who may not be as well known have been elevated specifically because they have had ties into these left-wing billionaire worlds and associations. I see that when I look at some of the leadership of the National Association of Evangelicals, which, if you're not familiar with them, is an incredibly influential institution. It represents some 45,000 churches and dozens of different denominations. And it's actually where Ronald Reagan gave his 1983 Evil Empire speech to their annual convention. So that's how much they've changed. And I would say people were elevated there who came out of this very DC corridor world. And those are people that I don't know their backgrounds as well because they don't have the paper trail that some of the others that you mentioned do. But they certainly seem to come from those think tanks where they were always aligned with, you might say, the power centers and the preoccupations of the power centers. And so when you look at that, those are the people that I go, they helped found some of these organizations that were from their outset. They didn't become compromised like the National Association of Evangelicals. They were always left-wing front groups.
So if I were to ask you, is the problem here false teachers, heretics, or hirelings? Sounds like your answer would be yes. And then that's just applied on a case-by-case basis at that point. Okay. So give our audience a couple of examples. You've already cited a couple, but give them a couple more examples from the book that would be things. I mean, as you can guess, we have a high concentration of Christians in this audience. Okay, so a couple of ideas or concepts or even people that would kind of, for them, itemize exactly what you're describing.
Well, if you look at something like an organization called the Evangelical Immigration Table.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yes. It is a front group. It was established as a front group from the outset around 2013. So a secular left foundation, the National Immigration Forum, founded the Evangelical Immigration Table in partnership with people like Sojourners, which, if you're not familiar with them, they are a very progressive left. They claim to be Christian. I don't think there's anything Christian about their stances, but they, and with the National Immigration Forum and the NAE and some other groups, founded this Evangelical Immigration Table specifically at that time. This was about 10 years ago, to get John McCain and Chuck Schumer's Gang of Eight bill across the finish line. So it was explicitly political from beginning to end. It drafted pastors to lobby legislators to try to convince them that all of the evangelicals in their churches really wanted them to pass this amnesty bill where illegal aliens would be given legal status if they just paid a fine of up to $1,000. So you can imagine how that would incentivize further illegal immigration. And then you flash forward 10 years and, all kinds of very large evangelical organizations are now involved with them, including the Council for Christian Colleges and Universities, which represents 185 Christian schools, including really well-known schools like Azusa and Biola, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission of the Southern Baptist Convention, And the SBC, as probably many in your audience know, is the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., represents some 5% of all the U.S. population, so incredibly influential. So they've been using their influence in Southern Baptist names to join up with the evangelical immigration table and push these lax border policies. To give you just one example of what they've done, they petitioned Biden to end the Remain in Mexico policy, which was a great Trump policy. It was very effective. And those are the kind of actions that they're taking in the name of people in the pews who don't agree with it. And these groups are funded by secular left funders. For example, the largest funder of the umbrella group over the evangelical immigration table, the National Immigration Forum, its largest funder in its initial years was George Soros.
An event transpired last week, just as your book was getting set to come out, that kind of confirmed everything your book talks about. And first of all, the Southern Baptist Convention being uniquely targeted here, and some of it's of its own, in my opinion, demise. In the Trump era, it's kind of turned Trump into its new plumb line. If you are pro-Trump or anti-Trump, that kind of defines your orthodoxy now, not sola scriptura. But that's probably another book that you'll have to write after this one. But there was a moment where they were going to dump a guy for being a clear simp for the spirit of the age. And then they got so much blowback from the New York Times and the Washington Post and MSNBC that they pulled back and reinstated him. Can you tell us about what this was that just happened last week?
Yeah. So as I just said, what we've had is the ERLC doing things in Southern Baptist name that a broad consensus of Southern Baptists don't agree with. And one of those has been things like promoting gun control. So right after the Nashville shooting, the head of this entity, Brent Leatherwood, immediately started pushing for red flag laws. And at the same time, and I have some empathy for him, but his kids went to the school where the shooting took place. He also began lobbying to suppress the Transgender Shooters Manifesto. Now, we have to remember, it's one thing for him to do that as a personal interest, but he was taking up these gun control issues and using ERLC resources to hold press conferences about why this Shooters Manifesto should be suppressed. Well, I believe the public, as a journalist, I believe the public has a right to that information. And so he just become incredibly unpopular, just like Russell Moore before him. He was handpicked by Russell Moore to lead this organization. He's very, very similar to him. And for that reason, it's become incredibly unpopular, so much so that at the annual convention in June, about 40% of the delegates to that meeting voted to abolish the ERLC altogether. And so the last straw then came just a week before last when Joe Biden announced that he was pulling out of the presidential race. Brent Leatherwood put out an official statement on behalf of the ERLC, representing Southern Baptists, praising Biden for his virtue and his selflessness in choosing to leave the the campaign trail, which is ridiculous because, one, nobody believes that this was an act of selflessness. Everyone knows he was pushed out, so it was dishonest. And then second of all, Biden was not choosing to leave the Oval Office. So there were actually a lot of ways in which this was a dangerous admission from Biden, that he does not have the mental faculties to continue to run a campaign, which means our enemies very much know that calls into question whether he has the mental faculties to lead a country. And also, this was an explicitly political choice by the Democrats. They were losing. The polls showed that they were losing. So what Brent Leatherwood was praising was Democratic election strategy. So that was just really a last straw. The board chair apparently met with him and told him he was fired. It sounds like that Brent Leatherwood did not receive. Initially, he was, maybe told to go on leave, didn't receive that well. The board chair then fired him. And then, as you said, there was huge blowback led by Russell Moore from the secular media, from the New York Times, from CNN, from Politico. They were all boosting Russell Moore's angry, outraged tweets about Brent Leatherwood being fired. And by the next morning, Brent Leatherwood was reinstated. So that was a very long answer. But now you've got all the straight dope on what happened with the Southern Baptist Convention there. But the upshot is, it is because Brent Leatherwood uses that institution to pursue policies that a broad consensus of Southern Baptists don't support.
So, folks, if you want to find out how did we get to a period of time that the once vaunted Southern Baptist Convention is brought to its knees by the New York Times and CNN, this book has the receipts, all right? And you want to make sure you check it out. Shepherds for Sale, How Evangelical Leaders Traded the Truth for a Leftist Agenda. Outstanding work. And again, receipts have been brought by Megan Basham at the Daily Wire. Megan, again, well done. Good and faithful servant. It's a fantastic work. And I'm very happy to see its success. And may your house increase. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And I do want to say really quick that it wouldn't have happened if you hadn't been an early supporter of my reporting. So thank you.
You're very, very welcome. And it was very well earned. All right. God bless. Take care.
You too.
All right. Todd and Aaron, get your thoughts here in a moment after we talk about our friends over at Hillsdale, because they're also part of the remnant pushing back against the spirit of the age. And they are celebrating Independence Month here in July. You can see their fantastic, inspiring portrayal of Thomas Jefferson as he reflects on the meaning of the Declaration of Independence in a letter that he wrote later in his life. You can watch that video for free. And if you do, you'll get a free commemorative copy of the Declaration of Independence as well from our friends at Hillsdale. If you go to daceforhillsdale.com, F-O-R, daceforhillsdale.com. But hey, don't delay. This is going to be a limited time offer. We're almost to the end of July, of course. daceforhillsdale.com is where you want to go to see this and get your copy of the Declaration at daceforhillsdale.com. Aaron, I'll start this with you. Your thoughts on what you just heard from Megan Basham.
Pit in my stomach. It's just, you knew this was, you had a suspicion. And you overtly knew that the writing was on the wall, if you will. That this type of infiltration from straight-up Marxists had gotten into various levels of the church. But I feel like we're watching a horror movie where one of the protagonists, one of the allies, gets to the end of the movie, and you realize the haunting was actually one of your friends that was going through this along with you. It's just, it is haunting. It really is. That Mammon has had this much impact. Not surprising, but it is haunting that Mammon has this kind of impact on the American church at the upper echelons. And you know they're scared. I heard a name. I saw somebody tweet the other day. This is a Tim Alberta, a name that I have not seen in years now. He issued a tweet saying, "This woman is unwell. Do not engage with her. Do not talk to her." And I thought he was talking about Laura Loomer.
Right.
No, it turns out I think he was talking about Megan Basham. You can tell they are scared.
And they should be.
They have done these dirty deeds in the darkness, and now they're coming out into the light. They should be scared. God, I pray that this actually does do the work of illuminating the darkness. Shining a light on what has been done behind the scenes. Because this cannot stay, this just cannot go on. This cannot go on. You can't have Marxists swaying your denomination, your church, an entire arm of Protestantism. You just can't have that and expect to continue on with any form of actual light or salt.
If you can't expunge them from the Southern Baptist Convention, then explain to me where in the culture you can. Back here on the Steve Deace Show, brought to you by our friends over at Backyard Butchers. If you want some of the best meat you've ever had, delivered right to your door, American raised and harvested from right here in America's backyards and ranches, right direct to your dinner table, make Backyard Butchers your only source of beef and chicken. And the meat does taste amazing, grass-fed, grain-finished. You can't beat it. I've tried it myself several times, and it is absolutely fantastic. That's why they've got over 500,000 happy customers, hundreds of 5-star reviews online. Pretty good for still a relatively new company. You're also going to like their entire customer service team made up of stay-at-home moms. So you know that they are on point. All right, not a detail escapes them, okay? So if you want to take advantage right now, you can subscribe, get an additional 10% off and free shipping if you go to backyardbutchers.com/Deace. And you can save an extra 20% off your entire order using the code Deace as well. All right, so save 20% off your entire order using the code Deace at backyardbutchers.com/Deace. And then if you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off and free shipping. Not bad for some of the best meat, maybe the best meat you've ever had. Backyardbutchers.com/Deace. Use the code Deace at backyardbutchers.com/Deace. So I've made a decision. I want us to continue to make sure that we exhaust fully what we just discussed with Megan Basham about her outstanding new book, Shepherds for Sale. Todd, we ran out of time before we could get your immediate feedback to the conversation with Megan, so let's go there first. What do you think?
Well, I had no idea of Leatherwood's connection to the Nashville school.
Neither did I.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Because if you juxtapose the fact that he has used his office to keep information about the transgender shooter from getting out to the public, while also using the New York Times to come to defense when he was on the ropes for such leadership, that you couldn't possibly distill a more perfect example of why Megan's book is absolutely necessary. You know, we've often compare and contrast the advantages outside of the theology, advantages, disadvantages, Catholic versus Protestant. And, you know, Steve has rightly said, man, if I had all of this claimed authority and, you know, you can be damn sure I'd use it. But in terms of the office of the Pope, I think even Protestants realize, like, it's not something like you just hire and fire. Leatherwood, like, you guys just believe based on your own theology. That's just a dude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, just, you're protecting him for what? Why? I mean, again, it's a perfect example of.
No,
why.
I mean, this is a perfect point you're making. What is the point of sola scriptura?
Yeah. Like,
and what is the point of sola scriptura if we're going to then, just like I would say, what's the point, like you pointed out, what is the point of a magisterium and all this infrastructure if we're not going to use it to instill discipline? What is the point of having freedom from all that bureaucracy that sola scriptura allegedly provides if you're just going to be frozen by a made-up bureaucracy of your own making nevertheless? Is that kind of what you're saying?
See, both of our sides.
That's exactly correct.
Both of our sides are full of phony baloney.
Correct.
We say we believe things, and oh, Nelly. But I've seen this movie before. The priest abuse scandal, which ultimately was about pederasty, not pedophilia, but the crime, the cover-up ultimately became just as bad as the crime in many respects. And you see it here. And this is to Aaron's point about now they're trying to turn Megan Basham into Laura Loomer because, there's going to be a cover-up on this. The same thing. Why do in both cases, on the Catholic side and the Protestant side, why is it so easy to infiltrate us?
Being
with the worst of the worst. We have to do this work, and we have got to blame the David Frenches of the world and the Russell Moores and all that stuff. But again, this goes beyond this. It's about this is a football fundamentals. What are we doing?
Correct. And that goes to the question that I asked before we ran out of time there, because I lost track of the clock. If you cannot expunge these elements from the Southern Baptist Convention, then explain to me where you can.
Yeah, this is a bigger... your point yesterday with Governor Ron DeSantis about the life movement. Now, is there a bigger issue that crosses into politics that of a theological nature than life? Of course not. But it is one of many issues. What we're talking about right now is actually the whole the entire church. Like, what are we doing? What is the point? Because it is on trial and it is hanging on by a razor's edge.
I remember I first heard about the immigration, what did she call it? The evangelical immigration table?
Something like that.
Something like that. I first heard about this when a guy, now I know him now, I didn't know him at the time, But he had just become a major name because he had written the best-selling book on Bonhoeffer, Eric Metaxas. And I had read that Metaxas had pulled his name from the organization after finding out what its true origins were and its true goals were. Okay? And, here's why I'm bringing that up. One of the points Daniel Horowitz and I make over and over again in Rise of the Fourth Reich is that they're not giving us permission to grant them the grace of the talking point that we were all faced with something we weren't really sure of the origins of or the ramifications therein. And so we all just kind of temporarily lost our minds, and no one comes out of this 100%, untainted. Everybody to some degree either bought into it or at least was willing to in order to, live any form of life for that brief period of time. You see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Okay. And the reason why we can't grant them that talking point, we can't grant them the grace that goes with that, is because whom among our leaders, Ron DeSantis literally teared up in apologizing for ever putting forth any kind of a shutdown of bars and restaurants. Remember that clip of him talking to the bar owners themselves? Okay. Yeah. But who came forward to say, dude, whoa, my bad. You know what I'm saying? Right. Almost no one did. Metaxas did. Metaxas I did some more research on that. I should have, and some of my people are telling me, you sure you know what you're getting yourself into? You guys turned out to be right. I'm out. They're not using my name anymore. It's not about not getting things wrong, man. We're human beings. None of us are infallible, all right? We're getting things wrong all the time. It's about the humility of acknowledging that we did and then going in the other direction of that which we got wrong, right? Yeah. This is my issue with Ed Stetzer. We played some ridiculous clips of Ed Stetzer with Francis Collins during COVID. Ridiculousness. Easily disproven. Does he come forward at any point in time saying, my bust. Shouldn't have done that.
No, and even worse, please. He goes on office against the people who are saying you were wrong.
Correct. Now he's doing videos. Here's how we can deprogram the deplorable Trump voters. Yeah. Correct. If without repentance, there needs to be a purge. This is biblical. Paul says multiple times in the New Testament. The most oft cited one is in 1 Corinthians, where he says to the church in Corinth, hey, that dude over there in the front row with his arm around his stepmom, the pagans don't even, and he's making out with her in church, the pagans don't even do that crap, okay? Throw him out, all right? So that Satan will have his way with him. What does that mean? You are providing him shelter from conviction of his own sin. Remove him from the sanctuary for two reasons. One, for the benefit of the gathering, because that sin will metastasize, it will grow, it'll be like a cancer, right? And it'll spread. So for the benefit of the gathering, but then also for his benefit. Because if you throw him out there and he's out from underneath our protection, he's much more likely to face the conviction of his sin, similar to like the prodigal son, right?
Yes.
Paul says this actually multiple times in the New Testament. That is not the only time he says this. He says at one point in one letter, I threw this person out so that Satan would have their way with them. Same thing, same principle. We can't have that. It spreads. And what happens when you let it spread is you have what is the Southern Baptist Convention today. The denomination that when you and I were growing up, and I had no idea what they even believed, okay? But I knew who they were because they made people shake and quiver in fear. Everybody knew who they were. I had no idea what they were about or what they believed. But everybody knew what that meant. That invoked an expectation, and they were going to hold things and the culture accountable to it. But you stop doing that. You stop removing that cancer. And you end up with, now we can't even fire Simps for the Spirit of the Age because we just can't handle it. The New York Times, of all people, who are literally a demonic construct, hates what we believe. How do you get there? This is how. And this is also why we focus so much, again, on a biblical worldview on this show. Because if the institution that is the only timeless institution God ever made, meaning it exists outside of time and space, as an institution, the inhabitants are not transcendent, we're mortals. But institutionally, it is transcendent. Upon this rock, it will be built, and not even the gates of hell will prevail. If the only transcendent institution God ever gave us, that is inhabited by beings who, not everybody there is a believer. There's false converts every era, everywhere you go, right?
Yeah.
But at least some significant sector of the inhabitants are temples of the Holy Spirit. They're bringing the Spirit of the living God with them, and and the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. They're bringing that Spirit with them everywhere they go, into that institution every single time they visit, right? If that place cannot hold the line, then there is no place that can. And I'm not saying you're wrong to be upset about the Republican Party abandoning the life issue. What I'm saying to you is, though, you cannot ask the political party to be better on this than the Southern Baptist Convention or the Catholic Church. You cannot do that. That's not how any of this works at all. It starts actually from the church. A political party is at best, an imperfect vessel for catechized people to use the civic realm for their belief systems. That's the best it can be. It is not meant to be a place of catechesis or discipleship or evangelism. That's what the church is. And if the churches cannot hold the line on this stuff, and of all churches, the Southern Baptist Convention can't, then you want to hear something that could really blow your mind? It is quite likely the Republican Party is to the right of much of the Southern Baptist Convention at this point. Not the other way around. That's how this is supposed to work, guys. The way it's supposed to work is we're supposed to be to the right of like every era of human history, basically. Like we're always supposed to feel like, well, man, they really aren't lined up with what I believe totally. That's kind of where we're supposed to be. If Elon Musk is a more formidable opponent to the mutilation of children than the Church of Jesus Christ, that's not the way this is supposed to go. All right? How many baby mamas does that guy have?
Quite a few.
He just brought porn onto his platform. Formally. Not permitted, formally. Would anybody argue that Elon Musk at this moment right now is more of a threat to Drag Queen Storytime Hour and the castration of our children than the Church of Jesus Christ in America is right now? Would anybody argue against me on that point? No, because it's inarguable. It's an obvious point. It's as obvious as gravity, as the laws of thermodynamics and physics. That's not the way this is supposed to work. Get some final thoughts in a moment after we talk about our friends over at Eden Pure, who understand that ultimately you want to get rid of that bad stuff. You can't just freshen over it. You can't just, spray some flowery scents. The components that cause that bad stuff are still there. That's why they came up with the Eden Pure Thunderstorm Air Purifier. Purifier. Like what much of the American church needs. Purifying. If you want to find out why this has become such a popular product with our audience as they came on board, so many success stories, you can get the 3-pack for whole home protection right now, all right, and put it on every level of your home if you want to do that, and all 3 units are under $200. Can't beat it. All right, go to EdenPureDeals.com, Eden, the place we got kicked out of. EdenPureDeals.com, use the discount code Steve3, that's for the 3-pack. The discount code is Steve3. So, and you can't beat it at EdenPureDeals.com. Cigarette smoke, bad food, bacteria, mildew, musk. Almost nothing is any match for the Eden Pure Thunderstorm Air Purifier, and you're never replacing filters either. It's filterless. All right? So go to EdenPureDeals.com, discount code Steve3 for the big discount. at EdenPureDeals.com. All right, guys, we're going to do Pop Culture Tuesday in the overtime today, but any final thoughts on the conversation we just had with and about Megan Basham and her outstanding new book?
Yeah, you've mentioned Musk today and yesterday, and I was frustrated when the instant reaction to Musk saying the church won't survive was, putting on the Theo nerd hat, and, oh, no, the gates of hell shall not prevail. We understand that, all right? But a world looking in, why would they? That's the question. Instead of correcting him on that, you should be acknowledging and looking internally at this entire edifice of the church. Like, why would anybody say, wow, that thing is just, it's not going anywhere. It looks like it's on fumes. It feels like, in my flesh, it feels like it's on fumes on a daily basis. So, again, even in reaction to that, don't put on your smarty pants hat on. Deal with it as Megan Basham is dealing with it. There's rot everywhere. What are you prepared to do about it?
Yeah, I struggle with that as well. Almost to, in the flesh, as you said, Todd, to the point of despair. We're not allowed to do that. And sunlight is always the best disinfectant. This book is just a good start. It's a great book, but it's just a start. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, this will rise and fall. This being discovering, shedding a light on, and hopefully excising the rot. That's going to rise and fall on each one of us to be discerning on our own. On our own. We can be band together, but we have to start with discernment. On our own, in our own churches, and in our own families. What's getting in, what's coming out.
Amen. Romans 8:28.